All right, David, welcome. Welcome to the Man Cave. Describe your surroundings.
My surroundings, it's an Australian man cave, that's for sure. Doesn't take you long to work that out with a big AUS up in the corner. It reflects your interests in particular, which of course is primarily sailing and cycling. Part of your family, of course, but as far as the man cave is concerned, it's very comfortable in here. You've got a sofa, you've got a fantastic fire, which is no doubt keeping you nice and warm in the winter, but we're here in a lovely sunny day in April in Cowes. You've got several bikes. You've got a fantastic workspace for fixing up anything, however long or big or small. You've got a lovely notice board with VIPs on it, as you told me. Some interesting photographs. You could probably spend a couple of hours just looking around and enjoying it. And of course, it's got you in it, which is the most important component.
Oh, fantastic. Great description. And I gave it a bit of a clean up for you, you'll notice. You know, this is...
I don't notice that sort of thing.
Well,
if it was messy or not, I wouldn't notice it. My wife would, but I wouldn't.
I've been like preparing for a royal visit having you over, David.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so here we are.
Yeah, they cut a lot of kings' heads off in the past, so I'm not sure I want to be royalty.
Well, look, thanks for coming over, mate. You know, here we are. We're in lockdown here in Cowes. We're spaced apart by around 2.5 metres at the moment. So we're doing the right thing here. But I thought it'd be great to catch up with you. Really like to touch on two things, and specifically related to sailing, and specifically, I guess, to the Etchells class, but I think it transcends that into any sailing. And I wanted to talk to you about the Etchells Fleet here in Cowes and your involvement in that, and also, I would really like to talk also about this youth scheme, youth system, the youth sailing here in Cowes in the Etchells, which has been a fantastic thing, and it's inspired other fleets around the world in the Etchells class to do a similar thing. But you know, first of all, I guess from my point of view, with regard to you, David, you know, when I first came here, it was one of my first ever overseas trips. First came to Cowes in the mid-90s to sail Etchells, actually. I did 2 regattas. I did the Etchells Nationals and the Cowes Week. One was in June, the other was obviously in August, Cowes Week. And there was in excess of 60 boats, 60 Etchells. And it was the who's who. You know, there was your America's Cup winners, Olympians, medalists and current Olympians at the time. IOR, like Admiral's Cup, you know, personalities, or the who's who, really, sailing Etchells here in Cowes. And I was absolutely blown away. And then, I guess over the years, having met Kate, my wife, at that event, and getting married subsequently, and having Cowes as a bit of a second home, for me, whilst I was still living in Australia, I'd pop back every few years, and certainly seeing the Etchells Fleet here dwindle over time. And then I remember when I moved here in around sort of 2010, it was very small. The fleet was very, very small. So I'd like to hear your story about that, and then also to do with you, David. When I settled here after I did the America's Cup in 2013, and I settled here, really the first time I'd met you properly, and I think I reached out, or someone reached out on my behalf on Facebook, that I had moved here and didn't have a lot going on, and you reached out immediately, and we had a very nice lunch, myself, yourself and Graham Sunderland, down at the Woodvale pub, and you gave me a lot of help, and speaks volumes about you. And then the last story I'll tell before we get into it is when we had the fire, the massive fire down at the just by the river, Medina. Can't remember the name of the yard, but we lost around 16 Etchells. Thereabouts 16 or 17. It was in February. and we were getting ready for the Worlds later that year. It was February 2016, and you had, by the end of that day, we had a call, and you had basically sorted everyone out. You'd solved everyone's problems. You had a solution for every single person that was affected by that fire. And within a day, you'd basically shored up the World Championships, which I thought was absolutely unbelievable. And the energy you have and the respect that people have for you really stood out. So again, welcome, David. Can I just ask you about your early days in sailing and how that you then moved into the Etchells?
Well, my early days in sailing were very late days. I didn't get into sailing until maybe my mid-30s. In fact, I didn't think I liked anything to do with the sea. But we used to have activity holidays, young children, and there weren't many activity holidays around, but neither Patsy nor I really liked beach-type holidays. And we ended up going to Loughborough College, or now university, and during the summer they would put on activity. So you could do photography, you could do squash, you could do metalwork, all sorts of things. I wanted to do outdoor stuff because I'm an accountant in stores all the time. I want to be outdoors. They had this sailing course. I thought, well, I'll do that. I don't think I like it, but I'll do it because it's outdoors. And we would get in a coach every morning and go to a reservoir and sail mirror dinghies. And I enjoyed it. I discovered I quite liked the whole thing. I wasn't racing. We were just learning how to make the thing work. And then I got in slowly, over the years, got into cruising. And it led to me then getting to be a navigator on an offshore boat, which I did. And I had mixed feelings about that. At 3 a.m, I had a very distinct feeling about it. But it was quite a different feeling when I got back onto land the next day.
Yeah.
I had a different view on it. And then I sort of gradually just morphed into racing. I moved to Malta. I started racing boats there. I bought a J125, which is a great boat for there. Not such a good boat in the Solent, as I later discovered. But my sailing really didn't come together until I met and worked with Graham Sunderland, who's a fantastic, as you know, professional sailor. He's a great guy, and he kind of took me under his wing. I mean, I was a pretty awful helm at the time, and some might argue I haven't improved that much more, but anything I have learned, I've learned from him, as well as from you and from others, but he's looked after me more than anybody else. And it was his idea. Although I was living in Malta, I was coming to the UK a lot and planning to come and live back here again, which I did after 12 years. And he said, why don't we get an Etchells? And I said, well, what is that? Well, that's a racing boat, fine. So we got an Etchells. And after about a year or so, I was coming to live back here. I was also conscious that I'd been very busy in my business, building up the business, and I had no time for anybody other than the family. And I never put back into sailing what I felt I should, and others did all the volunteering, and I didn't. And so I was thinking, well, I ought to do something, and that coincided with the then fleet captain going to move overseas and asking if I would replace him as fleet captain. And I thought, well, I've got to say yes to this because I've got to do something, and this is my opportunity. And the first time I went out as fleet captain to race, there was just my boat and Sean's boat with David Bedford. There were just 2 boats racing. So it was pretty obvious that we had a problem, really. You saw the heyday when there were 60 or 70 boats. I've heard about that. I never was involved in it then, of course. And then I had to think, well, what am I going to do? So I thought, well, I better get a spare boat so that people can have a go at it. And so I got a spare boat and said, do you want to have... I
imagine there were loads of boats around, loads of unused boats still around as a hangover from
there
the
was
late...
Not
heyday.
really. No, there were some.
Yeah.
Nothing like 70. I've never seen 70 at all. I think we've sometimes broken 20, but nothing like near 70. Ted Fort, a great supporter of the class, lent me one of his boats, and we brought it over here and we lent it out. And then I thought, well, we ought to get some young people involved. I've always wanted to do things for young people. And so we started the beginning of a youth program with sort of one boat. Got to start somewhere. And that then grew to now we have 6 or 7 boats for the youths. And also we've gone international. Australia started a youth program. America has started a youth program. We've got an international competition. And we've even got youths allowed, exceptionally, but it's great that they've been allowed to now enter the World Championships, even though they haven't come up the traditional ownership route. Because, of course, being youths, they can't do that. They're at a stage in their lives when they can't afford that.
Yes. So, David, just back to building the fleet. So, I guess when I moved back here in the sort of 2014 type time, there was quite a bit of activity. There would have been 13, 14, 15 boats sailing in the events at least. So just talk me through the steps you took and the critical things that happened to bring it back from almost non-existent.
Well, like many of these things, like building a business or winning a race or building a fleet, there's no one big thing you do. It's lots and lots and lots of little things. And you try lots and lots of little things, and some work and some don't, and sometimes you don't know which ones are working and which ones aren't. So it's just putting energy into it and following up and helping people. I've always taken the view I should help people. Facilitate was the key word, I guess. Are you coming out? Can I help get your boat out? Is there anything problems with the boats? Are you looking for crew? Is there damage that needs? Do you want me to take that on and get it fixed for you?
A lot of time on the phone and with and through people like Graham as well in sorting people's
absolutely, and then
sorting
afterwards,
the hassle out.
And making sure we were sociable afterwards. Come round, have a drink at my place. Come on, we're going to have a barbecue in the garden. You're all invited, and arranging for that to be as friendly as possible, and trying to keep any angst out and trying to smooth over things. Can't smooth over everything. People do end up in the protest room and sometimes come out a little upset, but that comes with the game, as you know. But it was just building up lots of things, and then we managed to get the Worlds, of course, which was a great opportunity for us, and that was a great kick for us to get it all going. And we've got the Worlds again next year in 2021 in Cowes. We had a fabulous Worlds. It just was a dream. We had some fabulous sailors here racing, and top champions. We had over 20 Olympic medalists from memory. It was over 20, and world champions such as yourself were racing here, and that was the pinnacle of it all. But going back, building the fleet, there's no simple trick. There's no one thing. It's just lots of energy. You try things, and sometimes they don't work, and sometimes they do.
Yeah, good one. Good. Well, I guess I'm hearing that it's energy. It's energy and it's passion, and it's a determination as well, to just keep pushing. And well, that's fantastic. That's fantastic, mate. So the youth. I guess what I heard is that pretty much immediately you identified that a way to get more people involved was through the youth. Through the youth avenue, but at the same time you also wanted to do something for youth regardless of that anyway. I guess one thing I was struck by in sailing in the fleet initially was the amount of young people around, both male and female, and it had a real vibe to it that I've never really felt before in the Etchells class anywhere. It felt really good, and there was certainly a different energy. And pretty much also immediately what struck me is that the youth weren't necessarily all on youth boats, so to speak. There was quite a sprinkling amongst the fleet. So was that one of the goals as well for this scheme to help provide sort of crew for the members?
It was certainly a goal, for sure, to introduce them to the fleet, to get them integrated, where crew were required. What do you want? You want a bowman? Yep, we've got a good bowman. This is what weight do you need? This is the guy. We'll introduce you. That was part of it. But remember, it didn't start like that. It started with nothing. And then it built up slowly to 6 youth boats, and also inviting youths to come back. We've had over 600 youths come through the programme.
That's incredible.
I had hooked up with the RYA at one point, and that was helpful. They had their own programme. They had an academy. And we provided part of their season on our boats, and that was good, and that was a good start. But it sort of grew, and now we've got youths coming back. They're coaching, they're training, they're introducing other people. Some have introduced owners. Some owners have given jobs to some of the youths. Several youths have got major managerial jobs, which all started from sailing with somebody in Cowes, and they're now in London or wherever they might be, with very successful careers, which was never, of course, my objective, but it was a very nice spin-off to have. And then I stumbled across the Greg City Academy, which is just the most amazing programme run by a guy called John Holt, who I think in many cases would be put down as certifiable mad, what he's done. But he took a school in the middle of a very impoverished area in London, in Haringey, Tottenham, around there, where the school is an impoverished one because the measure is at what percentage of school children have free school lunches, and the percentage there is something like 80%, which is among the highest. The school was a failing school at the time, on almost any measure you could take. It isn't now, but it was then. And John had many initiatives in sport, one of which was to do a fast net. And he stuck his neck out, and he bought a boat which was on the market for about £116,000 or something, and he got it for about 8. And it was a boat which Laurie Smith had skippered many years ago. Its name at that and now is Scaramouche, and he went in for a fast net campaign. And I heard that he was doing this, and I went to meet him, and I thought it was mad, to be quite honest. I mean, to take a few kids out, which isn't many, to go and do a fast net campaign, how many kids are you going to have on that? 8, 9, and the effort and the cost. Was that where the resource should go? And I had my grave doubts about it, but having met him and seen them, I thought, well, how can I help him? And I thought, well, we had developed our youth programme into a 5-weekend coaching course in the winter, headed up by David Bedford, who's a superb coach, and pulled in many good people, including, of course, your good self, with your rig model, and others who all added to the programme, and it's a great programme. I had purposefully only looked for experienced youths who had come up from, oppies at age 5, because I didn't want to introduce poor sailors into the fleet who might then crash a boat, and then I have the owners saying, what are you doing bringing these inexperienced sailors with expensive boats onto the track when you put my boat at risk and my crew at risk? But I decided I would nonetheless offer them a coaching programme, and I said, you can join in on the coaching. I'll give you a boat and you bring some of your sailors. That 2 things happened then. One is that their sailing went up enormously because they were being coached and they never had race training at all. They didn't know the first thing about it, frankly. They would sit on Scaramouche, they would tack every 45 minutes, go back to sleep, wait to tack again, and they'd do that. Now suddenly they were in the middle of an absolute fire on the Etchells with everything happening. And then what happened in the 5th weekend, we actually have races. So we've got 6 youth teams, and they're going to race, and they race to see who wins a boat. Now it's not entirely on the results of the racing, because we also look at the character of the individuals and the commitment of the individuals. Well, we had 6 races that weekend, and I thought, well, the Greg City Academy they haven't been sailing on Oppie since age 5, they've just started. But they were super keen. They spent the week looking at videos. They spent the week when they weren't here talking to each other, talking to John Holt, talking to people here. What went wrong with that manoeuvre? What did we do wrong? How do we do it better? And they really focused on it. Well, they won the first race. Well, everybody thought, well, that's a freak, isn't it? What happened there? How come they won? They're not going to win. Goodness me. They won the second race. Start thinking, hold on, what's going on here? They won the third race.
No way.
And I think they came second in the fourth. They absolutely, and I thought, I've got all this wrong. I thought I had to start with experienced sailors.
Yes.
And here we started with absolutely inexperienced sailors, no question about it. Some of them had never touched a spinnaker before. And let alone helming, let alone going round marks, going round 5-10 marks in an hour and a half. So that changed my view on everything, and I realised something that I've known all my life, that motivation is the most important thing. Well, motivation.
Well, I think also motivation for sure, but the environment you created down there yourself and David and Graham and all these great people that you have involved, the environment that was created provided the platform there and showed them really how to go about it. So just to rewind it a little, and look, what I'm sort of seeing and what I'm hearing is that you and your team have really created a scenario that most clubs or associations in the world would desire, which is the retention, I guess, or the path for youth sailors to transition over from dinghy classes into keel boats and so they can move ahead and stay within the sport rather than there be a barrier after dinghy sailing, if you like, or after club sailing or school sailing, which is fantastic. So can you just talk me through, so I'm a youth sailor, let's say, and it's coming towards the end of the year, and I've heard about this thing in Cowes where you can go and sail an Etchells with a youth team. What's the process? How does it work?
Well, we start with the coaching program, which we start in January. And we're going to have 5 weekends, which are
so you apply. Someone applies.
You apply. We encourage you to apply as a squad, as a team, because it's easier to deal with one person who's motivating and pulling along the others. So we encourage that, but you don't have to. We don't want to turn you down because you're on your own and you don't have any other sailing friends. So we look on the whole for minimum age of 18, but we don't stick to that. So, when David Heritage's son Will want to come in, or David Bedford, who's also his son is called Will, they were great sailors already at the age of 12 or 13, and the parents understood the game, and so we would have them. And also, I've got much easier on the upper age as well. If you're a bit older than whenever we think we had 21, we're at 25. But I mean, if you're 30 and keen, come on in. Yeah, well, we don't want to we just want to encourage people, but it tends to be youth coming. We then ask you to make a financial contribution. It works out about £200 a head for 5 weekends of sailing. We have got reduced accommodation rates at the Royal London in particular, but a lot of the guys work out that they can stay with a friend. We provide part of the course. The course includes a Saturday meal and a big debrief with a guest speaker. So we ask them to come on Saturday morning. We kick off at about 8:30. And then we try to be on the water as much as possible, but we have some off-water things, classroom stuff to do in the event that there's either no wind or too much wind, but we keep them in our back pocket. If we can, we'll go on the water. We only pull that out, so we do protests and first aid and rigging and so on and talks. But on the whole, we want to be out in the water. Saturday's evening is very important. We have a guest speaker, the coaches, because we've got a number of coaches now. David Bedford is the head coach, but they would have taken video and they put it up on the screen and say, what went wrong here, guys, as well as what went well. And it's also kept light and humorous. It's not there to humiliate people. That's the last thing you want to do. But you want to look at mistakes so that people can learn from them. And then we'll have a guest speaker. We've had a number of excellent speakers come along. And then on the Sunday we continue, but we always look to finish no later than 4 o'clock. So everybody knows when they can get away. We don't dribble on. We're going to finish at that time, so you know the score, and we might finish a bit earlier. We emphasise safety. We've got a big safety program. We've got some tight rules which we look for. We're looking for people to look after boats and behave themselves, and we encourage people who want to work on the boats. If they want to come at another time and do some work on the boats, we encourage that. They have to look after the equipment, of course. The compasses and the VHFs in particular have got to be looked after, and they've got to tie the boats up well. All those little things. There's more than just getting on the water and racing. And then at the fifth weekend, they're all geared up to have this racing, and maybe I shouldn't say it, but I try to get them all. Everyone's a winner. I like everyone to be a winner and have a boat, but I tell them there's only 1 or 2 boats, so that they value it. And then I'm looking on the whole. I learnt from Malta, where I ran a match racing program, that you can't go to individuals. You have to get a squad leader. You've got to get that person. You can't deal with 24 people. You can deal with 4 or 5 people, and you say, right, you get your team together. I also say, look, you've got to be committed, but we understand you can't come. They've won a boat for the whole season. They're going to race in the fleet. So we say, look, if you can't make it, you've got to find a replacement of a similar standard and similar weight. Don't not take the boat out. If you don't take the boat out, if it's not racing, maybe you won't keep the boat. And also, that's one of the rules. If you are racing with an owner, you mustn't let your owner down. And the way to, if you can't do it because your sister's getting married, you call up and say, I can't make it, but I've got George. He's a great bowman, and he's got a good sailing record. So you solve the problem of the owner. You don't give him a problem, you solve his problem. And for the owners, I say you've got to commit to the crew. And if you can't make it, you should consider letting them take the boat out, because they've committed to racing that weekend. They're looking forward to it. And if you can't do it because of a work commitment, or maybe your sister's getting married, then you should let them take it out, and you should look after them in every way you can. So it's responsibility from both sides to make that work well, and it has worked very well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking through your the document that you sent me yesterday. It was almost almost a semi sort of contract, really, with the sailors, and I was very, very impressed with the level of detail, but also the characteristics. I guess it was sort of putting it into the like you've just said. Making sure you commit to the season, make sure the boat goes out, you make sure the boat's in good order, and so on and so forth, and their financial commitment, but also things they'll be provided with, like very thoughtful things like ferry tickets and so on and so forth. Those fantastic. Now my sense that when I do turn up to help is that number one, one of the things I notice is that you've got a great group of support people around, and I turn up, I guess, on days where there's no sailing, and David calls me because it's heinous weather, and he asks if I can come and do a talk, which is great, and I guess that's mostly how I see the program on days like that. But I see a large support staff of graduates, if you like, from previous years, and fantastic young people that I've gotten to know over the years. But David Bedford seems to me like the right man for the job of being the head coach. He's a great sailor. He could write a book on racing on the Solent with the tides and so on and so forth. A lot of experience there. Obviously, together with Graham, who's also around, and he has wrote a book on tides.
Who has written a book on tides? Yes, this is true.
Winning tides, of course. So it's fantastic. But I just wanted to say with David, he's I guess he's on the crustier, older side of life to those kids anyway. But it's old school characteristics that he's putting across to the youth. You know, just good, solid disciplines of looking after your boat. Being on time, being respectful, and as well as all the sailing characteristics. So that would seem to be a very good choice.
Well, we've been blessed by having him there. He is a fantastic choice. Yes, he's very enthusiastic. He's very keen. He relates to the youth very, very well. His eye for detail is fantastic. And he explains things so well, and he's a very memorable teacher, as you know. And he keeps everybody very amused throughout it all, but he pulls in everybody. You know, they all come along and they're loyal to him, as well as to the program. So yeah, David Bedford is a key component to this, and without him, it would not have been as successful. There's no question about it. His input has been fantastic and really important. It has. But having said that, like all of us, it's a team, and there's Graham, there's you, there's me. There's a lot of people involved to make these things work. It's not down to one individual, and I know David will be the first person to say that. So,
David, just logistically, how many boats are available to the youths?
Six.
Six.
Sometimes I cadge some others from where I need some more. I go.
Fantastic.
Cadging. Can I have your boat? Can I borrow your boat, please?
Yeah.
And give it back to you.
The financial model you've been running to, do you get sponsorship and so on? Could you just talk us through that?
Yeah. Well, the financial side is difficult. There's a number of sources. One has been me. Mm-hmm. Two has been people who have donated boats to me. They're usually in a bit of a mess. And by the way, one of the things I do is to make sure the boats are in good condition. It's no good giving a youth a boat which just falls apart when you go racing. That's very dispiriting. So they need a boat that's in very good condition with good sails. Going back to finance though, we get help from the Yacht Haven. They give us reduced rates. The Red Funnel give us 400-500 free tickets during the season, so that the kids can come across. We get very good deals from North Sails and from Doyle's, who've been very supportive. The charity at the Royal London has helped over the years. We've had a number of owners, like Ted Fort in particular, who have been very, very helpful. And they've all combined to help us, and then the kids themselves. If they're going to go for a world championship, I look for them to raise the money for that, and some money to do the 5 weekends racing. So we're looking for them to commit to and help. And in the past, I've even had a little help from the RYA, but I don't like pulling teeth too much.
Yes, yeah. And what's the retention rate been like over the years?
Well,
not only in the Etchells, but I guess you keep an eye on these people and where they go within the sport and so on.
Well, the idea isn't that it's the same people coming back every year. So we don't want a high retention rate in that sense. But I think that when I look back over the years, the retention rate isn't so much a retention rate in Etchells, although there is that for sure. But there's not a bad retention rate in sailing. They've gone off and got onto other boats, and some of them have been doing transatlantic crossings. One of them won the Youth Yachtsman of the Year award.
Wow.
For both being in the Fastnet and offshore, and also doing the Etchells sailing. He's making a career in sailing.
Yes.
And I think that, I mean, I don't track it, to be honest, so it's all
Right.
rather just on my experience of bumping into them all. But I can't give you a figure for retention rate, but I think that they get a lot out of it. A number of them do stay in sailing, but inevitably people go off and get married and have children and do all sorts of other things, which is just part of life.
But you've given them the opportunity.
And they might come back to it later when they have young children.
Yeah.
You know, I can see them coming back.
Who would be your biggest success story in terms of moving on to other things in sailing?
I think probably it's the young lad who won the Youth Yachtsman of the Year.
Yes. Well, you've had, which is Montel.
Montel.
That's right.
Montel, who met Prince Philip, he got awards from the Royal Yacht Squadron. He got an award from Princess Anne through the RYA. And whilst he was lauded and got many things, he, in a sense, reflected what was going on in the Greg City Academy. And he would be the first to say that one of the most important components in all of that was his racing on Etchells. Because the racing on Etchells, as you know, whatever you learn on Etchells, you can take onto any other boat. And it's intense and at a high level. And so he got a lot from that.
You've had an America's Cup sailor, or someone that's moved on to the America's Cup.
Yes, bless
as
him.
Well. Yes.
Bless him, Mon. He sailed with me. I don't think I can take any credit for that. I think if any, it would have been the other way around. I learned from him. I don't think he learnt much from me. He came as a sort of pretty much well-cooked young sailor already, but he raced with me. I say with me. I think it was more with Graham than me, if I'm honest. And he's a lovely lad and a very keen sailor, very enthusiastic, and he's got on to the America's Cup for not the Australian team. I'm sorry about that.
Well, they almost are Australian, aren't they?
Right.
Oh, go on.
Well,
for BAR, that's right.
Yeah,
in the last edition, and Team Ineos as they are today.
Yeah, that's right. So he's sailing for Britain. He is. So yes, he's one of our most famous young sailors as well. Quite right.
Well, thank you very much, David. We'll wrap it up, and thanks very much for coming round and visiting the Man Cave, gracing the venue with your presence.
That's okay. Do I see Kate about the fee?
And mate, long may it continue, the youth sailing and the Cowes Etchells Fleet, and thanks very much for everything you've put into it.
Well, it's very kind of you, and thank you for all the support you've given over the years to Cowes, because you're an important component of making that youth team and the whole fleet work. We're very, very, very fortunate to have you living in Cowes.
Thank you. All right.